how much would you score? What difficulties would you face? Choosing the right date gives you the correct amount of time to prepare and stuff. My name is Aaditya, and I am an incoming freshman at Stanford.
Hi guys, so we'll be starting with today's webinar on how to break over a 1500 on your SATs, and we have Aaditya Nalawade from Stanford Class of 2028 who will share his personal experiences, tips and strategies on what it takes to score over 1500. So if you all have any questions, you all can put them in the chat box and we'll have a question session later at the end.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Kushi. And hi guys, my name is Aaditya, and I am an incoming freshman at Stanford, where I'm going to be studying computer science. In fact, I'm going to be heading to the campus in a couple of weeks. So, it's going to be a new experience for me as well. But I take it that Stanford and other top universities are a priority for a lot of you guys, especially as international students. It gets tougher and you have to perform way better than the domestic students. And since most of the colleges are, reinstating their test policies and they're expecting you to share your SAT or ECT scores, this is going to be an important metric of your application, and it gets your foot in the door. So the reason I often ask people to prepare for the SATs is because it's your foot through the door, right? It's one of the very first things that they'll look at before they start evaluating the rest of your application. And it determines if you'll get the attention you deserve, on your essays and other important aspects of your application. So yeah, this is going to be a digital SAT 101. I'm going to give you a few tips, a few insights. I'll be sharing what I have done, what mistakes I made. And by the end of this session, what I expect is that you have a clearer idea of, when to take a test, how to go about it, how to prepare, and how to score well. So I really want to start with my own experience. So I'll give you a little bit of my story, right? I had no intentions of applying to the US until the beginning of 12th grade. So I was in CBSE 12th, PCM, and I was preparing for the JEE, and I wanted to do engineering in India. But one of my friends recommended that since I had a good extracurricular profile in high school, I should take a shot at, applying to universities abroad as well. So the very decision of applying to Stanford was made in the beginning of 12th grade. And I knew that I had to give the SAT. I had never heard of the SAT before that. None of my seniors or anyone in my school had attempted SAT. So I did not know what the format was, where the test is conducted, how to register for it. But I went onto the internet and I did a bit of research and I figured out, okay, there's this organization called College Board and they conduct this SAT. So I chose the June attempt because that was the earliest attempt available to me. I got finished with 11th grade in April, and then the very next attempt was May, but that was a little too short for me to prepare for. So I thought I would take the June attempt. And interestingly, when I appeared for the SAT, which was last year, it was the very first year that the digital SAT format was introduced. So before that, we had the conventional SAT, the pen and paper one. But mine was the very first year where they introduced digital SAT. So the problem for me was there weren't a lot of resources available online, right? Now, the advantage that you guys have today is that a lot of YouTubers, a lot of creators, a lot of companies, they've come up with books and resources and, these courses for you to prepare for the digital SAT. That was not my case. So I had to rely on resources from the conventional SAT and then translate them to the format of this new test. But thankfully, I was able to manage to do that. And I ended up scoring a 1560, which I think is a good score. Ideally, anything above 1500 gets your foot through the door. So don't sweat over if it's 1560 or 1580 or 1590. Anything above 1500 is a really good score. It gets your foot through the door for all top universities. And that was my experience. And here's what we'll be discussing in today's session, right? Now, the very first thing that I want to answer for each one of you is where you stand today. So even before you prepare, even before you register for your test, what you should know is where you stand as of today. If I were to give you the exam right now and make you attempt it, how much would you score? What difficulties would you face? You must have that idea so that you can go from where you are right now to becoming a person who scores above 1500. Next, we're going to come to questions like how to choose your test day, right? Because I think this is a very important part of your preparation journey. Choosing the right date gives you the correct amount of time to prepare and stuff. I'm going to be answering your question of how to make a study plan. I think this will be the crux of today's discussion, right? So how do you actually prepare? What resources do you use? How do you manage your time? What concepts do you learn first? What concepts do you keep for later? I'll be answering all of those questions. How do you prepare every day, right? Now, in this part, I'm going to share, what your schedule should be like, how you should plan your days and your weeks when you're preparing for the SAT. What resources to use. I'm going to be sharing like all of the resources I used, a bunch of books that I used, a bunch of YouTube channels that I found useful so that you can refer to them later. And of course, I'm going to be giving you some tips for the test day, like when you're actually attempting the SAT, what you should do on that day to manage your time, to elevate stress, and to actually end up performing, right? So the very first thing that I'll tell you is before you even start your preparations, do a diagnostic test. Now, what is a diagnostic test? A diagnostic test is essentially give the full length exam, give the full length sample question paper without any preparations. So essentially, like whatever preparation you have done so far, even if you haven't, right? I want you to give a full length test with proper test conditions. So the same time limits, okay, the same platform. You won't be using any external resource or any other person will be helping you. I want you to simulate the exact test environment and do a test right away. Now you can do this after our today's session or maybe tomorrow, but do this at the earliest date possible. And I'll tell you why. The purpose of a diagnostic test is to understand where you stand right now. Okay. And you need to know that because if you don't know where I am right now, you'll not know where I have to be in the next 2 or 3 months or the next 6 months. So the first step is doing a diagnostic test. And there are 3 questions you should ask yourself. The first one is, did I struggle with time management? Right? Because time management is a crucial part of the SAT. And if you're struggling with it on your first day, then you have chances of improving by the time you're actually giving your test. But if you don't do a diagnostic test and you just keep preparing with practice questions and you end up, mismanaging your time on test day, that is going to affect your scores. So this is the very first metric that you should evaluate after a diagnostic test. The second metric is, do you struggle with a specific subject or topic? Right? It is pretty common for people to struggle with certain topics in the English part, or maybe the second module of English, or some of them struggle with math. So the purpose of a diagnostic test is also to let you know what topics are you struggling with so that you can work upon them. And third, and the most important part is, did I score as per my expectations? Right? Because when you're attempting a test without like any preparation, you'll know what your baseline score is. Okay, this is the minimum amount of score I can get with zero preparation. And do you think that score is at par with your expectations? Let's say you want to score 1500, but in the diagnostic test, you're scoring 1300. Is that at par with your expectation? No. But that gives you an idea of where you should go from here. And just to give you a personal context, when I gave my diagnostic test, I scored, if I recall correctly, I scored a 1240. Okay, so I scored 1240 and I took my score from 1240 to 1560 in my duration of preparation. So that is how helpful a diagnostic test is, because it gives you a reality check and it tells you how hard you have to work. So this is the very first thing I want all of you guys to do. If you've done it before this, like really good. But if you haven't, go give a diagnostic test right away. Now, once you're done with your test, right, now you know where you stand. Now is the time to set your goals. Okay, where you want to be. You know where you are. Now you have to set your goal of where you want to be. And there are 3 important aspects of setting your goal. Okay, first is you should decide how much do I want to score, right? Now, I know that 1500 plus is an ideal score. It is applicable to all colleges, but perhaps you might have different objectives, right? You might be applying to a very specific college, which may not require a 1500 plus score. It may require, let's say, a 1460 plus score. If that is the case, then set that to be your goal, okay? Because you want to distribute your time equally between the SAT, extracurriculars, school, and all the other parts of your application. So the very first goal that you have to set is, how much do I want to score? The second is, how much time do I want to spend preparing? This is also very important. Why? Because most of you guys are in 11th or 12th grade, or maybe some of you are in 10th grade. And school is really important, right? You are going to have a bunch of exams coming up. You'll have the extracurriculars that you're working on. You'll have your passion projects and everything else that is part of your application. So you have a lot on your plate. So you need to be prepared with, okay, these are the number of hours I can devote to the SAT every week. And that should be your goal. Because if you're exceeding that, you are like essentially taking effort and focus from the rest of your application. And if you're not exceeding it, you aren't preparing for the SAT well. So you need to have a set goal of how many hours do I want to devote to SAT preparations every week. And the third aspect of it is how many attempts do I want to avail? Right now, in my case, I ended up scoring well in the very first attempt, but that may not be the case with you, right? You might require multiple attempts. So when you're setting your goal, you should also set a minimum number of attempts that you want to take in case you don't score well on the first one. So ideally, I'd suggest have 2 to 3 attempts available to you before you submit your college application, so that in case you don't end up scoring, what you expected in the first one, you have multiple options available to you. Now, once you've set your goals, the next step is picking your test day. Now, the thing is, I've spoken to a lot of students, okay, a lot of my juniors in school who are also taking the SAT after seeing my score. And the biggest mistake they make is they don't pick the most optimal test day. Now, there are 3 aspects to choosing the best test day, okay? First is that it should give you enough time to prepare. So you don't want to take a test day which is 1 month down the line so that you don't have enough time to prepare. So you should ideally aim for 3 months between the time you register for the test and the time you have it, so that you can devote those for preparation. Second is pick a test day which allows you to balance school and SAT. And my suggestion here would be try and take the test dates either in June or October. Why? Because in June, you'll just be done with your summer vacation. So you can spend your summer vacation preparing for the SAT because you don't have school, so you can devote more time. And October, because ideally October is a calm month in school, right? You don't have a lot of exams. You usually have maybe your pre-boards in December and your half yearlies in August or September. So you'll have another month there to prepare. So ideally pick these 2 dates, but you might be coming from a different curriculum. I was CBSE, you may be IB or ICSE, and based on what your curriculum allows, pick a very optimal test date. And the third aspect is, of course, pick a test date which keeps more attempts open to you. So don't pick the very last test date available to you. Pick test dates that still let you have 2 or 3 more attempts left after the first attempt and the date of submitting your application. Now, if you do this right, you are actually setting yourself up for success, because once you have the right date and you give yourself the right time to prepare, then it's all about execution, right? If you pick the wrong date, then you're going to have to work extra hard and you're going to have to devote more time, which will be eating out of your schedule. Once you've picked the right test day, now is the time to make a plan. Okay, so you have your goal, you have your test date. So you know where you want to be, you know when you have to take the test. Now is the most important aspect of your preparation journey, which is to make a clear, distinct plan. And this is something I don't see a lot of students do. Okay. So I've done these counseling sessions before. I've been a mentor to many students before this. And the number one mistake they make with SAT is they don't have a concrete plan. And in terms of concrete, I mean that you need to have weekly targets. So let's say your SAT is going to be 3 months from now. I want you to have a target for every week in those 3 months. Where do you want to go from day 1 to day 7? And do that over and over and over again. Now, one tip I can give you when you're making a plan is to always tackle the easier concepts first. When it comes to the SAT, we are from the Indian curriculum. Okay, so SAT, the difficulty level is at par with 10th grade in India. So maths is usually easier for students. English is what requires more preparation. If that is the case, tackle maths first. Get done with all of your maths preparation and then come to English. Or perhaps even when you come to English, right, there are certain concepts in English which are easy and certain concepts which are hard. So I want you to do the easier one first so that you are securing that score in the exam, right? Okay, you are securing that section of your exam completely, and then you can focus on improving the harder concepts. And the third rule which I followed, okay, now this might not be universal, but it is something which has helped me deeply, is the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule is simple. You need to spend 80% of your time practicing questions and 20% of your time learning new concepts. Why I say this is because in the SAT, there aren't a lot of concepts, okay? The syllabus is not broad. You have very specific types of questions which are asked. So you don't need to spend a lot of time learning new concepts, unlike you do in other competitive exams in India. So what you should focus on is understanding a concept and then investing more time practicing those types of questions and bettering your skills at answering them quickly. And the fourth rule that I often tell people is you need to be prepared for the test 15 days before your attempt. And I made this mistake. Okay. I wasn't prepared for the test entirely 15 days before my attempt, which is why for the last couple of weeks, I had to pull all nighters and, work more hard than I should have, which ended up costing me, time when I was preparing for school or extracurriculars. So you should ideally,
Priya ji,
okay, sorry, there was an interruption, but I'd request everyone to mute your mic.
I'll just mute her once.
Yeah, cool, no worries. Yeah, so ideally try and be prepared 15 days before your exam. And why I see this is because you never know what might come up. Okay, you might have a competition at school. Okay, you might have a extracurricular that requires, that specific period of time to be devoted. So it is a safer option to be prepared early and then leave some room for maybe revision or maybe focusing on other things at school or your extracurriculars. Now, this is like a very basic about how you want to make a plan, but I'm going to go give you the details here on forward. So how do you actually prepare? Now, if you go onto the internet, like everyone has their own theories on how you should prepare for the SAT. Especially a lot of these counseling services and these SAT coaching tutors and stuff, they have, they have these timelines, they have these modules and stuff. Now, I did not refer to any of that. I followed a very simple principle, and I'm going to be sharing that with you today. It was a 3-step process, okay? So how did I prepare? Analysis, practice, and testing. And what we're going to do is I'm going to deep dive into each of these, okay? And this is the crux of what I'm going to be telling you today, okay? So all of my insights, all of my core tips that are going to help you are in these 3 steps, which I'm going to be explaining now. And the first step is analysis. This brings me to another important aspect of the SAT, which is the S in the SAT, right? The S in the SAT stands for standardized. Now, if you look at all standardized exam, you'll always notice that there are underlying trends and patterns, right? If you look at the SAT, you'll realize that it's the same types of questions repeating over and over again. So if you go to, let's say, math, right? It's often just the numbers which are changing, okay? It's like 10 becomes 15, apples become bananas, but the questions are pretty similar. The core structure is same. Even if you go to English, right? The types of questions are always similar. Only the words may change or the paragraphs may change. So when you're doing analysis, right? Before you start learning topics, I want you to do all of the available sample tests once again. So you had your diagnostic test, right? So you gave one test, you understood where you are. Now I want you to go to Blue Book, and Blue Book, to those of you who may not know, is the official testing app for the SAT. You have to create a College Board account and log into Blue Book. And in Blue Book, you're going to have, full length practice tests, practice questions, and you'll also be attending your real exam in Blue Book. So it gives you a familiarity with the actual testing environment. So in the analysis stage, what I want you to do is go on to Blue Book, and there are 4 full-length sample tests. There might be more, but when I was attempting, there were 4. And I want you to give all 4 of them in a 1-day gap. So let's say you do your diagnostic test today or tomorrow. Give yourself a day gap and then attempt these 4 tests on 4 consecutive days, right? And what that does to you is very important. It tells you how the exam is. It tells you the very nature of the exam. And then I apply something called the analysis algorithm. Now, this algorithm is pretty simple, okay? What I want you to do is, as you're attempting these 4 full-length practice tests, have a notepad and a pen by your side and make a list of the types of question you encounter in each subject. So for example, in math,
you'll always see that there is a certain type of question which asks you to, calculate the value of X or Y in a combination of equations. So you have to note that down. Okay, this is A type of question. B type of question might be they'll give you a graph and ask you what the equation of the graph is. Uh, Three type of questions maybe they'll give you a a geometrical structure like a triangle or a circle or a polygon, and they'll ask you a certain angle or length of a certain side. So what I want you to do is when you're giving these four tests, every question you encounter, note down the type of question that is. Even for English, right? In English, I still remember the list that I made. So there was like vocabulary in context. There was note summarization. There was replacing a sentence in a paragraph. And when you make this list of every type of question you encounter, you'll end up realizing that there aren't a lot of types of questions. Okay. I'm pretty sure in math, it's like the number is between 30 to 40. So it's like 30 to 40 types of questions repeating over and over again. And in English, that number is somewhere around 15 or 20. So if you have the types of question by the end of this preparation, like this analysis stage, you are set for the next stages that will come. Okay. This is the only objective. Give the four tests and make a list of every type of question you encounter. Now, once you have that, right, now is the time to practice. Now comes the second stage of your preparation. And how do you practice? You practice by tackling each type of question. Okay. So I don't want you to tackle subjects. I don't want you to tackle chapters or concepts. I want you to tackle each type of question. So let's say you're preparing for math. Okay. Start with the types of questions that you found were easier to attempt, and then move on to the types of questions that you found were hard to attempt. And what you'll realize is the easier questions don't require for you to learn something new. It's like stuff that you've already learned in school. So if you can get done with that early and then again apply the 80-20 rule of practicing more and learning less, you secure at least 60 to 80% of your marks in the exam already. And then I want you to go down that list and come to the harder parts, right? The harder types of questions that you were either struggling with time or you were struggling with accuracy. And then I want you to flip the 80-20 rule. So for the easier concepts, the 80-20 rule is practice more, learn less. For the harder concepts, the 80-20 rule is learn more and then focus on practicing. So when you come down that list and you find, okay, so maybe vocabulary in context is a difficult type of question you're facing in English. So I want you to skip it for later. And when you actually come to it, I want you to prepare extremely hard for it and then practice. You have to prepare because if it is hard, you don't understand it. So you need to spend more time learning than practicing, because if you practice it without learning the core concept, you're still going to end up making mistakes. Now, after you're done with this stage, okay, I'll share a few resources as well. I forgot this slide was there. Official Blue Book tests, of course, as I mentioned, right? These are the best resources because it's like actual questions from College Board. It's the same guys making the actual exam, so you know what difficulty level they are aiming for. Second is the Khan Academy Digital SAT course. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Khan Academy, and some of you may already be using it for your school or any other Olympiads and stuff. But Khan Academy has a really good digital SAT course. It's 100% free. And the best part about Khan Academy that a lot of people don't know is that they have a collaboration with College Board. So the question bank from which the questions for the actual test are taken is the same question bank from which Khan Academy takes the questions when you're practicing. And a lot of people don't know this. So what you'll be practicing in Khan Academy are actual questions that someone has done in their exam previously. So go to Khan Academy. They have a comprehensive digital SAT course. This was the only resource I used. So I did not pay for any books. I did not pay for any tutors. I did not pay for any counseling when it came to the SAT. I only went on to Khan Academy and learned everything I wanted for free. So you have both English and math there. And if you do choose to go to Khan Academy, whenever you end a lesson in this course, you'll have a quiz section which will have 30 questions. Now, another beauty of Khan Academy is if you attempt all 30 questions, instead of moving on to the next section, if you try and reattempt the quiz, you'll have 30 new questions. So they have an endless question bank. Okay. Like I'm pretty sure no other resources on the internet have so many questions. So on Khan Academy, what I also want you to do is attempt the quizzes over and over again. You'll realize you'll know where the quizzes are once you start, right? It's at the end of every lesson. Just keep doing those quizzes over and over again because each time you're getting new questions. And third part is a few YouTube channels. Now, I did not refer to these channels because since digital SAT was new when I attempted it, there weren't a lot of content creators telling you how to go about it. But now I found these two really helpful YouTube channels, and I want you guys to make a note of it. First is Score, your college counselor. Now, this guy is really good when it comes to the English section of the SAT. So if you're struggling with answering, certain types of questions, just go and watch his videos because he gives you like in detailed explanation of how to attempt each type of question. And second is this lady called lady from Strategic Test Prep. She also does conceptual videos, but she also does review videos. So after every digital attempt is done, she'll speak to students who attempted the exam and she'll get their feedback and share it with you guys. So she understands what trends are, what concepts are getting more weightage in the exam. So ideally, like without using any other resources, using only the things that I've mentioned on this slide, you can prepare for the SAT entirely. You don't need to go anywhere else. Okay. And I know there are other books which give you sample questions and you can choose to do them as well. Okay. Like the more the merrier. But this is like the baseline. If you get done with this, you are well positioned to score above 1500. Another important thing that I tell people is get excellent at using Desmos. Now, the Desmos is the calculator that you have available to you in the math section. And the best part is it's a graphing calculator. It has inbuilt functions. So, stuff like average, sum, all of these functions are inbuilt. So you don't even have to do that manually. And I'm pretty sure Desmos helped me solve 80% of questions in math. So the beauty of it is, even if you don't know the answer to a question, there's a high chance Desmos can help you solving it. Why? Because A, you can graph the equations. Let's say you have an equation-based question, you can just graph the equation and know, where the value of X or Y is 0. And second is, you can do quick calculations. Okay. Let's say you don't know the answers, but there's like 4 large equations to, and you just want a final value. Instead of manually adding and subtracting numbers, you have Desmos available to you. So one tip that I'll give you for preparing Desmos is they have an official YouTube channel. So like Desmos Calculator, the company, they have a YouTube channel and there are even like more YouTube tutorials. So get really good at using Desmos, like be very fast. Okay. You should know where to add brackets. Okay. You should know, how to have multiple charts, how to change their labelings and stuff, or how to, label coordinates when you're doing coordinate geometry questions. So if you get really good at Desmos, I think you can solve 80% of math questions without even knowing what the concept is. So get really, really good at Desmos. A lot of people miss out on this because they think Desmos is like any other calculator. It's not. Okay, it's not a normal calculator. It's a graphing calculator. And that is like, the beauty is that, conventional SAT did not have a calculator. So there you have to do everything manually. Digital SAT gives you Desmos and the questions are simpler. So you're like halfway there. So, you have this really good arrow in your quiver and I want you to use it. Then we come to the third stage of your preparation, which is testing. And this is the very large stage. So just to give you a recap, what you've done so far is you've done the analysis stage where you made a list of the types of questions. Second was your preparation phase where you went about learning how to answer each and every type of questions, right? So you did the easier ones first, and then you went on to the hard ones. So your analysis stage usually takes about 1 week. The preparation state takes around 1 to 2 months, okay? Because there you have to tackle each and every type of question and focus on the 80-20 rule of practicing and learning. Now, the testing stage is for the very last month of your preparation. So let's say you have an exam on 1st of October. Today is 1st of September. You should ideally start with the testing phase now. Now, what is the testing phase? Again, give full-length practice tests. Okay. But this time, I don't want you to make a list of questions because you know the list of types. Okay. Now, what I want you to focus on is what mistakes are you making? So the very purpose of the third stage of your preparation is to understand what mistakes you're making. And there are like very broad categories of mistakes you can make. First is time management. And I see a lot of people struggle with this. I struggle with it personally. It was very hard for me to, finish the module 2 questions. Some people struggle with, actually using the application. Okay. So how do you skip to the next question? How do you mark a question for review? All of these technicalities of the Blue Book app are not easy to understand. So you might realize that you're struggling with those, and you might realize that you're struggling with certain concepts. Okay, let's say you like did 80 to 90% of the questions really well. There's like this specific type of question or a specific topic that you're struggling with. The testing phase is to understand what that is. You need to, like, the only purpose is to know where you are making mistakes so that you can devote the next 15 to 20 days correcting those mistakes. So what you have to do is again do the same thing. Remember the 4 tests you gave in the analysis stage? Give those 4 tests again. Okay. This time, don't make list of questions. Instead, make a list of the mistakes you're making. And the second thing is, once you give those tests again, you'll automatically know how much improvement you've made. Okay. So when you give it for the first time, let's say you were scoring in the 1200 to 1300 range. And let's say now you're scoring in the 1400 to 1500 range. So you will get a visualization of how much improvement you've made in the past couple months. So that's the objective of the testing stage. And now once you make the list of the mistakes you're making, is the time to fix those mistakes. Now I'm going to be addressing a few of them specifically. So let's start with time management. Okay. Now I'll give you my own strategy whenever I began a test. Okay. Let's say you start a test on Blue Book. The first thing I want you to do is you want to go through the entire test. Okay. So the moment you can see the questions on your screen, just skim through every question. Okay. Like every module has 27 questions. Just skip through each question. Like in the very first minute, just know all the 27 questions. Just have a brief look at them. Now, what that does is that helps you identify question blocks. Now, what are question blocks? If you give a test on Blue Book, you will realize that similar types of questions are grouped together. Okay. So let's say in English, all of the vocabulary and context questions are together. So it's like a 3 to 4 question block. Then it's another 3 to 4 question block. Then it's another 3 to 4 question block. So once you go through the entire test, you'll realize, okay, this block is the first block. Then this type of question is in the second block. This type of question is in the third block. And now you already know what type of questions you're good at and what type of questions you struggle with. So once you know where the question block is, okay, let's say questions 15 to 27 are easy and 1 to 10 are hard. Then what I want you to do is go to 15 and attempt those first, and then return to the original questions. So once you go through the entire test and identify what are the easy and the hard components, you can tackle the easy ones first and the hard ones later. And this is like the best tip for time management. And elimination for guesses, like this is an important one. So what happens is, like this will happen on the test day as well. There will always be a couple of questions that you don't have enough time to solve. Okay, these are usually the last questions in second module, which are really hard. Here, what I want you to do is follow the elimination process. So eliminate the answers which are obviously wrong. How do you do that? In English, it is more of a gut sense because there isn't any quantitative metric for you to evaluate. But in math, what you can use is Desmos. So go on to Desmos and see, like, if it's a graphing question, like plot the graph and see which equation is obviously wrong. And once you know that, eliminate them. And once you have, let's say, 1 or 2 options remaining, you can make an educated guess if you have less amount of time. And another insight that I have to share here is in the SAT, the most obvious answer is usually correct. Now, this is not true for all examinations. If you give Indian exams like the JEE or NEET, usually the most obvious answer is the wrong answer. In SAT, it's the exact opposite of that. If you see a really obvious answer, now obvious in a sense that you feel it is correct based on, years of preparation in school, there's a high chance that that answer is the correct answer. So time management is going to be really crucial. And not just time management in the actual exam, but time management throughout your preparation journey. So, when you're setting your weekly limits, or okay, when you're deciding, okay, this is going to be my study block every day, let's say 4 to 6 p.m., I'm going to be preparing for the SAT, you have to manage your time extremely well. So in the preparation stage, as well as the actual exam, if you manage your time well, you're going to score really, really well. Okay. And then I want to give you another insight. Okay. I think this is like the golden rule of the SAT, the golden rule. Like if you follow this single rule, you can attempt every type of question. And that rule is you have to ask yourself, why is the correct answer the correct answer? Okay. Now, it's pretty deep. Okay, why is the correct answer the correct answer? If you know the reasoning behind the correct answer being the correct answer, and how do you know this reasoning? Whenever you're rechecking your tests, okay, let's say you give full length practice tests on Blue Book, and when you're rechecking your test for the correct and the wrong answers, Blue Book gives you an explanation of why the correct answer was the correct answer. So a lot of people just skip over that. Okay, even if you score correctly, you don't like bother reading the explanation of why the correct answer was the correct answer. But I want you to read those explanations below each option. Okay, whenever you're reviewing your test, be it the diagnostic test, be it the analysis stage, be it the testing stage, whenever you're done with your test and you're reviewing your answers, below each option in your answer like interface, there's an explanation given for why this option was wrong and why this option was correct. I want you to read each and every one of those explanations because you'll realize that what was the reasoning behind whoever made those questions for selecting the right and the wrong option. And you'll realize that the reason for it being right is common across most questions. So if you read those explanations, you'll get a better idea of how to go about solving these questions. So, yeah, that's pretty much it, right? I've given you all of my insights. I've given you all of these details. And now is the time to ask questions. So, you can either type your questions in the chat or maybe Khushi could, arrange it such that you can actually ask your questions to me. Any which ways work. But, any questions you have about the SAT, how to prepare for it, anything that I may have missed out in this presentation, I'd love to answer.
If you have any question, you all can either like just raise your hand or put in the chat box. Someone's asking, can you please tell us what were your grades from 9th to 12th?
Okay, so 9th to 12th, I was in CBSE throughout. In ninth grade, I scored 97%. In 10th grade, in the board exams, I scored 96%. In 11th grade, I scored 90%. And in 12th grade, I again scored 90%.
There is a hand raised. Oh. Yeah.
Hi Aditya. I just want to understand, like, how are you managing your time and what was your schedule? Like, how many hours you were putting in for studies and other things?
Okay, that's a great question, Meet. So in my case, the thing was that I was preparing for the JEE on the side. So a lot of my week was packed with JEE preparation at school and at coaching. So Monday to Friday was purely for JEE. And what I did was I prepared for the SAT on Saturdays and Sundays. And my schedule was simple, okay? Like all of Saturday and Sunday, I was preparing for the SAT. So there was no set hours, okay? Like I used to sit in the morning and prepare until like evening. And another advantage to me was since I gave the June attempt, I had 2 months of vacation before it. So, that freed up some space for me. And ideally, if you're giving the June attempt, you get a lot of time in summer vacations. So in that case, you could have like time blocks, okay, 2 hours of preparation every day. But if you're preparing during like normal school months, I'd ideally recommend devote more of your weekends, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, to your SAT prep and the rest of it to school. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. Yes.
There are two more. Chavi raised hand.
Yeah, hi. Actually, I wanted to ask, like you said, you had a very good extracurricular profile during your high school. So I just want to ask, is it necessary to have an extracurricular profile? And can you just tell me, like for me, I am pursuing dummy school. So would it be
Okay.
necessary to do something while, on the side?
Okay. So, Shavi, the thing is, it is pretty subjective. The importance of extracurriculars, it really depends on the colleges that you are aiming for. So in my case, I was aiming for Stanford and other top colleges. So they require like excellent extracurriculars and excellent academic records. So which was one of the reasons, I had to balance all of these things. But let's say you are applying to a certain country or a certain college, which, maybe values academics over extracurriculars, or maybe their application process requires you to submit a lot of academic based extracurriculars like Olympiads and stuff. In that case, SAT and academics trump extracurriculars. But I still think that if you're applying to a college in the US, in most cases, you also need a strong extracurricular background and good academics. Now, if you're in a coaching, I understand that you don't have, like common activities or extracurriculars that I have access to in a school. But you can still do things which are outside of school, be it volunteer work, non-profits, if you're working on a passion project, or any other of your niche interests like a sport or a musical instrument that you play, right? You can still do all of those things outside of school, but ideally have a good balance of extracurriculars and academics because they have an equal weightage in your application, especially to US colleges.
Thank you so much.
Radhika Rosary.
Sure. So, first of all, thank you so much, Aditya, for explaining how you go about the entire process of taking the test. It was honestly really nice. But the question I was curious about is how did you eventually decide which university you wanted to apply to? And how did you decide that, okay, this is the one that's best for me?
Okay. So my reasoning was, I think was pretty unconventional. So, since I had no plans of applying to the US until like beginning of 12th grade, I hadn't really researched universities. Okay, so I didn't know that you have UCs and then you have these Ivy Leagues and then you have these top universities and state universities. I didn't know any of that stuff. What I did know is I had heard of Stanford and Harvard because they're pretty popular. So, I'd heard of them on social media, in movies and stuff. So, since when someone recommended that I apply to the US, like Stanford and Harvard were the only universities I'd heard of. I hadn't heard of any other university in the US. I didn't even know the whole concept of how applications worked, and which was one of the reasons I chose to apply to Stanford. And interestingly, it was the only university I applied to. So I did not apply to any other university. Like Stanford was the only one. And the only reasoning is because it's the only university I'd heard of. I hadn't done any research on my part. So I just went ahead with whatever I knew. I know that's not that's not the answer you were looking for. You were looking for something pretty more analytical. But in my case, this was this. But in case you are like in the process of selecting universities, I think there's a few metrics that you can evaluate, which I've realized now after I've gotten in is one is location. I think, location of a university is extremely important. So in my case, I'm pursuing computer science. I'm someone who's interested in tech. So Stanford's location is ideal, right? It's in the Bay Area. It's in Silicon Valley. Whatever your interests are, based on that, select a location on the East or the West Coast, which aligns with your career plans or your interests. Second is, of course, how the university is in terms of academics, faculty, extracurricular opportunities, ROI in terms of maybe how many jobs you get or entrepreneurships and stuff. So use all of those metrics to evaluate, whatever is right. And another recommendation I'd give to you is speak to current students, right? So like if you want to know more about Stanford, you can hit me up and I'll tell you if Stanford is the right fit for you. So try and approach students on LinkedIn or find their email address somehow and have a conversation with them to choose the right university for you. I hope that answers your question.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Tanisha and Tanish asked, what are some good ECs according to you? What ECs did you partake in?
Oh, okay. So good EC. See, that's again pretty subjective. See, that's the fallacy of US admissions. There's like no right, no wrong, no good, no bad. A good EC is anything that you've devoted time to and done because you had genuine interest in it and not for the sake of your application. That's the answer I give to most people, right? So in my case, all of my ECs were pretty average. Okay. I wasn't, let's say, a national level sports player, or I hadn't had international level achievements, no awards, none of these prizes and stuff. But whatever extracurriculars I had, okay, for example, I led this tree plantation drive in my hometown, right? For 3 years, I planted close to 700 trees and I ensured that all of them survived. Okay, that may not be a big deal. Okay, I've seen people who have done a lot more in terms of environment and stuff, but this was something that was very close to my heart, and I explained that in my application. Okay, one of my essays was about this, so I devoted enough time to it. Okay, I showed them dedication that for 3 years I was planting and maintaining tree saplings. Okay, so that was like one of the ECs that helped my application stand out. Another one of my ECs was so I was actively involved in MUNs. Okay, so I had done close to 30 or 40 MUNs since sixth grade in my school. So it was something which I had devoted a lot of time to, right? So like the admission officers know, okay, he hasn't done this in ninth and 10th grade just to put it on his application. He's been doing it for a lot of time because he has genuine interest in it. So do stuff that is genuinely interesting. Okay, don't try and do things because people say that it'll add to your application. But whatever you're doing, ensure you do it well. Okay, I don't care if it is tending to your garden at your house or competing in international level competitions. Just do it extremely well and have a valid reason for, like, when you're explaining about your ECs to the admission officers, have a clear reasoning of why you did this and why it should be on your application.
Parth is asking, should I give SATs in March as an Indian like you? Currently, I'm in the 11th grade.
Okay, March. So, but my recommendation would be, since you're in 11th grade right now, I think 11th grade usually ends in March or April. Okay, I'm assuming you are in CBSE, ICSU. Okay, I'm not very familiar with how IB works, but at least in these two boards, you'll probably finishing 11th grade in March or April. In that case, don't give that attempt because you'll have your final exams. Okay, so you're CBSE, right? He mentioned in the chat, right? So it'll be an overlap. Okay, you'll be preparing for your final exams and you'll be preparing for the SAT. Ideally, give the June attempt, June or May, right, or even August. Okay, August works too. So any of these attempts will be more feasible because you'll just be starting with 12th grade, so you won't have a workload there, and you can devote you'll have at least 1 or 2 months of vacation after this. You can devote those to preparation before the SAT. So that will be an ideal test date.
And Sarthak asked, in one interview, you said that essay could hold 50% weightage in the application process. So what were your essays about, and any tips you'd like to give us, especially for the YS essay?
Okay. Okay. I'm not sure. Okay, what interview you saw? Okay. Okay. Interesting. Okay. People are seeing my interviews and coming here. Okay. Uh, yeah, essays are important. My essay, if you want to ask about it, was, so my like major common app essay was about. So I am from this place called Kolhapur in Maharashtra, and in 2021 we had these floods there. Okay, like they ravaged the entire district, like a few of the neighboring districts as well. So I described that incident, and whatever like role I played during that crisis. That was my like what my essay was about. Now, if I were to give you a few essay tips, I think like in a single line, it is, you have to sell your story. Like that's the only purpose of your essay. You have to sell your story. You have to tell them who you are and why you deserve to be in the college. Now, I don't care if you do that with your vocabulary. I don't care if you do that with your accomplishments. I don't care if you do that with your writing skills. You could do it with any of those things. But the only purpose is to convey to the admissions officer that you deserve to be there. You deserve a place in that college. Now, a lot of my specific tips, maybe this is not the right opportunity because we have a lot of SAT related questions coming up. But be a good storyteller. Have a very clear story in mind. Okay, when you're writing an essay, like look at it as writing a movie script. You like it's a movie about your life, and if you want to make it interesting, if you want to have a plot, and then portray yourself as a character, who evolves, who learns new things, like throughout that journey, please do that, especially in the YS essay, right? You ask why me, or like, okay, why me, right? So be very clear with why you should be in the college. That's the only purpose, okay? And be a good storyteller. Like that's the only tip I give for writing good essays.
I don't see any more questions, but if anyone has any other questions, I think they'll send it to us and then I'll send them to you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. It was a great webinar, really practical. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys for being here.